Welcome to Moments with Marianne. I'm so delighted we're spending this time here today. We have a very inspiring show coming right up with two very special guests. Our first guest today is Myra Mossman, and she's here to share with us her new memoir, My Random Death. Now, Myra is a federal criminal appeals attorney who has handled complex cases before the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Ninth Circuit and has appeared before the U.S. Supreme Court. She is also an archival hand bookbinder and paper restorer, a martial artist, and a reader and teacher of the Tarot and Kabbalah. So let's welcome to the show, Myra Mossman.
Hello. Thank you for inviting me.
You know, what an honor it is to have you here and to talk about your memoir. My goodness. I mean, it just grabs you as soon as you start reading it. I've got to ask you, what inspired you? What was the whole motivation behind writing this memoir at this time?
Well, I often like to say it didn't come from a sense of vanity. It actually came from a sense of purpose. And it was to put the record straight about what actually occurred on the island, on Martha's Vineyard Island. There was a case filed against the man that murdered me, and I'm not saying that word lightly. And there were some newspaper articles written. So I wanted to set the record straight off of the Martha's Vineyard Gazette reports, and I'm grateful that they did do those articles. But I wanted to talk about the intuitive aspect, the coincidental and the meaningful coincidences, and what Carl Jung talked about as synchronistic moments, and how I relied on my intuition, and how that guided me from that moment to develop myself. And I think this is what people can draw on now, as well as the Me Too movement was just reaching its climax and being in the public square. And I felt the same sort of inhibition. I thought the law enforcement wouldn't believe me, wouldn't believe I was attacked, would think I was the instigator, and wouldn't do the investigation properly. And so that was my concern, because I thought he would kill again.
Well, your book really goes through some just intense detail about this. When you first saw your attacker, what was your intuition telling you then?
Well, I saw him actually from behind. He was standing next to a truck, and I was sort of attracted to the truck because my boyfriend and I just bought an old used mini Toyota pickup, and so I was attracted to this shiny van and then I saw him, and just the back of him, he was all in black, and as I walked past him, I remember saying to my boyfriend Victor, "That's an evil man." His evilness penetrated me. I started shaking, and I felt exhausted. And as I slumped into our vehicle, and we drove home, and I didn't say a word. I was just exhausted. His evil penetrated me. I never saw his face. Just a sense about him, and that's that intuitive part of us that we need to pay attention to. Yeah. So that's when I saw him, and then the next day is when he attacked me.
And for our listeners that are new to your story, the reason you talk about being murdered is because that was his intention when he attacked you. He really was trying to kill you.
Yes, he just dragged me into the woods and got on top of me and started strangling me. And he was like 6 foot something. I didn't know how to defend myself at that time. A young man, very strong, in his 30s. And he dragged me and got on top of me and strangled me, and I was exhausted. I had a premonition. I had a number of premonitions before this happened, very strong premonitions. And so I was very lucid, like, this is what it's happening. This is what I was warned about. I was very lucid, but I got exhausted, and I gave up to death. I just gave up to death. And it was an unusual moment in the sense of having to comprehend what death is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you go into detail in regards to just that experience and just, how terror-stricken you were at that time.
And just Marianne, actually, I wasn't afraid then because of the premonitions. I felt like I wanted to know, I was curious. But when I let go into death and I died, I felt I died, and then a voice came out, my inner voice said, you're not going to get away with this, murderer. You're not going to get away with this. And I broke back into consciousness, and there's some inner visions that I saw that I go through in the book. And when I came aware of my surroundings again, that's when I got afraid. That's when I got very afraid, because I thought, I don't know what happened. I'm alive, but he will kill me, and I'm afraid I will not come back. And that's when I started feeling that the law enforcement wouldn't believe me, and they would laugh at me. I actually felt that they would laugh at me. And so that my fear was when I came back into everyday world, back from death, and I couldn't see him. I was in the woods. I didn't know where he was. And I thought, wow, if he finds me again, I won't be able to come back.
Yeah,
and so then,
it's so difficult, and just everything you went through, because it's interesting when we look at assault, especially how this individual tried to, he just really tried to kill you. I mean, you look at that, a lot of times they think there's other things going on, and in your book you talk about this, how they're like, oh, he attempted to rape you, and none of that is there.
Yeah, he was charged with attempted rape, attempted murder, and assault and battery. And it's my boyfriend. I was like, Victor, trying to get back to our cottage on Martha's Vineyard, actually his home, his family's home. And he heard this sound. He didn't know if it was human or animal, and he came rushing out of the cottage and up the path, and I fell into his arms, and he carried me back into it was a house, excuse me. There's two houses and a cottage on the property. In the house, and he called the police right away, and an ambulance right away. And when law enforcement came in, I was very calm, and he was suspicious of me. Why are you so calm? Women that have been through what you've experienced don't trust men. Police officers can't even get close to them to get the information. Why are you so calm? And I actually felt like yelling at him, like, because I'm alive. But I had to get them to investigate this crime, because this man would kill again. And so I said, my fiancé is with me, Victor. That's why I'm calm. He's here. Never called him a fiancé before. And so the police officer, he processed that, and he understood, and he proceeded to question me about just the details of the incident, and broadcasted it over a CD to other police officers on the island. Luckily, just if I can just elaborate a little bit, when that broadcast was coming out of their radios, one of the officers was stopped at a red light, and he looked up, and the very van I was describing was behind him, and he pulled the guy over, got his information, but the guy was wearing a baseball cap, and he wasn't when he attacked me. And so they let him go. And 4 hours later, they realized that was the guy, and they found him in a bar drinking. And he thought he was being arrested for murder. He thought he left me for dead. Police officers later told me this. And so, and I go into that in the memoir. He was drinking in a bar. Nonchalant.
Yeah.
Unbelievable. A married man with kids, with a child. So
that's just unreal. I mean, you look at this, and people would probably think, not knowing, him, or maybe the side of him, that maybe he was a solid guy,
absolutely.
Yeah, and to find out that he did this, they're probably going, well, wait a minute.
Yeah, I mean, it's he was held for, the judge wanted to know if he was fit to stand trial. It's a legal term to see if you understand the case, the charges against you, and you can help in your own defense. And so he was sent to the Sexually Dangerous Institute in Bridgewater in Massachusetts. And it's usually a 2-week determination. He was there for 6 months, and they found him fit to stand trial. But that is a notorious institution. and that, doctors are having sex with the patients and psychiatrists, and there was a film made about it. And so it's all very unusual in that regard about why he was kept there that long. I think I can't get those records. They're sealed. They're personal. So, but as a lawyer, now I'm a lawyer. I wasn't at the time. I have an understanding of what these circumstances were.
Mm-hmm. How did your life change from before the attack to after?
I was a bookbinder and paper restorer, and we had stopped at Vic's family's house on Martha's Vineyard, before I was going to an interview in Massachusetts, at Lawrence, Massachusetts. I never went to the interview. Instead, on my way to the hospital on Martha's Vineyard after I was attacked, I got 5, I call them divine directives. One was to learn a martial art, how to defend myself, move to the other side of the continent when I healed, learn about meaningful coincidence, learn about a metaphysics, and I became a tarot reader, and learned to meditate. And so I became an initiate. I became a beginner, and I had to learn and develop all of those directives. And 10 years later, I was given another divine directive to become an attorney. And so the reason why it took me 40 years to write the book was because I had to get proficient. I had to master all of those tasks that I had been directed to do. And so it fundamentally changed my life, totally fundamentally changed my life.
Yeah, it seems you're on a totally different track than what you were before.
And for your listeners, that's really how you can discern like a shamanic or meaningful or transformational experience, because your life is changed like 360 degrees. And it fundamentally alters your perceptions, and you want to learn more. And so, people have these experiences, and I want them to pay attention to them. Some of them are not so transformational, but there's meaningful coincidence happening to us all the time that can guide us. So that's yeah.
So during the time when you're recovering, I mean, it was such a horrible event you went through. What was your recovery like? And what was it going through the whole process, making sure that this person, really there was some justice happening?
Well, the interesting thing is, before this incident, I hitchhiked by myself. I went to school in Canada, and I'm also a Canadian citizen. I hitchhiked by myself from the West Coast to Ontario. I was always hitchhiking. I haven't hitchhiked ever again, and so that altered me. And my recovery was, I'm a twin, and the question of self was always something that was curious to me, like the existential question, because I was a twin. Was I really a self? After this incident, I felt I was reborn, and I was reborn as a single person. And so it was the first time in my life I had sort of like this individuation. And so that recovery was kind of interesting in that way. I was in the hospital for 5 days, totally exhausted. He broke a bone in my throat, and they were wondering if they had to give me a tracheotomy. So I was taken off the island by Coast Guard boat to Hyannisport, and I was in there for 4 days, I believe 4 or 5 days, in intensive care for 1 day, and then I was monitored. I couldn't even get out of bed by myself, totally exhausted, totally drained, but I was happy. I was happy to be alive, just happy. And I took everything in stride in that regard, and I knew I had to heal and get busy, learning how to martial arts, learning a metaphysics, learning. And it doesn't stop, because you really just gain proficiency in these areas, but you could never really ultimately master any of them. So, yeah.
So
and then I drove. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, Mark.
Go ahead.
But when I healed, I did the first divine directive. Vic and me drove across the United States, and I went to the other side of the continent, and I settled in Vancouver, British Columbia.
Well, and it's interesting how your journey went. When you're following these directives, and you call them divine directives that we talked about a little bit ago, were these things that you intuitively received? Is it something that maybe your higher self gave you? What is the divine directive, and how did you get that information?
Do you believe exactly how like my higher self, I believed it was like a revelation. They came to me all at once. You have to learn to meditate. You have to learn a martial arts. You have to learn more about meaningful coincidences. You have to learn metaphysics, which I was later brought to become a tarot reader and teacher. And then you have to move to the other. It just all came, how revelation does. It's kind of an epistemological realm that we just kind of know, a knowingness. And so it all came at once when I was in the ambulance. And on the way to the hospital on Martha's Vineyard Island, it just came to me, and it altered my direction in life. I was a bookbinder and paper restorer, and so I still did that in Vancouver, and I ultimately worked at the Public Archives of Canada as a paper restorer on the archival holdings. So I still kept that desire to make books by hand and restore valuable flat work, it's called, maps, manuscripts, things done in pen and ink, and pencil and ink. And so I still kept that desire to make that a book by hand. That was a desire that, I wanted to make something that was meaningful to me. And so I became a bookbinder, and that was by magic, and the memoir goes into that. So, but it totally altered me, and it shaped how I was for the rest of my life. And then the aspect of writing the book was also important. I knew I had to write it.
Was it difficult for you at times to write the book?
Yes, it was. It was difficult to. My twin sister helped me a lot in the sense of just opening up. You can state the facts, but just opening up my feelings was and reliving the death experience over and over to get it right. And so I could actually now see it. I see it clearly, and when I'm living it, and sometimes it's difficult to talk because I'm reliving it, and so. But that's okay. It's okay. You know what I'm saying? That I'm willing to do that. It's not something that terrified me. I'm okay to go into it. I'm okay to dig deep. I'm not afraid of that.
Yeah, moving into those really difficult places. You could tell by the way that you wrote the book. I mean, you go into great detail where you could feel like that must have been very difficult to do at times.
Thank you for reading it, Marianne. I really appreciate that. Thank you.
So when we look at, I know you did a lot of journaling, during your process. How did that help you with your psyche, your spirituality, just your experience altogether?
I made my own journals by hand, and so just filling them up was interesting. But just trying to get my honest, authentic self out. And so the journaling was important. Also, I kept very much a dream journal as well, and worked both those worlds to look at the coincidences between the two. And so I kept a very elaborate dream journal. And then just my feeling journal, which I still have. It's still with me. And I think it's important for people because if you're a visual person, it helps you see things and see patterns and develop your own symbols and your own meanings into things. And so I think that's important for people if they want to understand themselves and work with their own the own coincidences in their own lives.
So you talk about in your book just when you decided to take up tarot, and I'd love for you to explain that journey and how that helped you as you're going through your healing process and this new walk that you're on.
I was in Vancouver, and I was in the Vancouver Public Library doing some research on Carl Jung, because the directive to learn about meaningful coincidence took me to study Carl Jung and his notions of synchronicity. And while I was reading in the library, a man came up to me and he says, "You look like you need a tarot reading. Why don't you buy me a tea and I'll give you a reading?" And I says, "Okay, I've never had one before." And he read for me, and it was like nothing. I got zero out of it. His cards weren't inspiring, and I just didn't. He says, "Look, I got a better deck at my house, my apartment. Why don't you come with me?" And here I am, following this guy. I said, "Sure." To his apartment. I don't know him. I'd just been attacked a few months ago. But I trusted him. I sensed his goodness. And we went back into his apartment. I told him, "I want my boyfriend. You have to meet my boyfriend, Victor, and he'd love you and would enjoy meeting you." And so I let him know that I was attached. And then he brought out this deck of tarot cards, this other deck, and I felt like I was holding jewels, like gems. I was just so captivated by them. It was actually the Aleister Crowley deck, and many people won't read that deck I'm not interested in Crowley. I don't study him. Lady Frida Harris was the artist. But I was captivated by this deck, and I immediately started studying tarot. I knew that was the metaphysics that I was drawn to have to learn. And I studied diligently on my own and doing, studying and laying out the cards and looking at, researching symbols and getting a very deep knowledge of it. And then I started reading professionally. And I developed my own layout working with the Kabbalah Holy Tree of Life, which is sort of my spiritual practice. So I integrate my spiritual practice and my tarot. And I have to tell you, I've never met a dull person in 30 years. Everybody is extraordinary. We might be blocked to our gifts and talents and skills, but people are extraordinary, and I've never met anybody dull. And so it's been a rewarding journey for me spiritually, and also connecting and working with people and making them get a deeper understanding of themselves and insights and how to integrate this into their lives. And so the tarot has been an important journey for me. Astrology, palm reading. I'm not sort of saying everybody has to become a tarot reader, but it gives you you have to learn to trust yourself, and that's where you trust your intuition when you're doing readings. So it develops that part of yourself as well.
What do you want our readers and listeners to know about, just intuition? As we look at intuition, your book, it talks a lot about following your intuition. What do you want them to know about that in relationship to your book?
I talk about this old Hasidic tale, Hasidic saying that nothing is coincidental to a Jew. That the hallmark of evil and unholiness, if you look at things, is, it just happened, like flippantly. So take your life meaningful and look at the circumstances that happen when your inner world and your outer world meet. It could happen in a dream. It could happen in what we call a serendipitous moment, which is sort of a lighthearted synchronicity. And so pay attention. And most people have a favorite number, and they'll notice when they see it. But ask yourself why. And that's the beginning. That's the beginning of the working with symbols. And you're going to develop your own symbols and understanding. But you have to get in touch with your intuition, because you have to, I believe in, a strong independence. I think it comes from being a twin, a strong sense of self and being self-directed and self-motivated. And this is where our intuition can guide us to that authentic place in us. So we're not taking up fads and fancies and wearing other people's description of ourselves. And so that's what I think a reader can learn, and to learn to trust themselves. ourselves. That's the most important thing, I think. And I'm empathetic to people that have low self-esteem. I think it's one of the most debilitating diseases that we have. And to learn to trust yourself, to work out of that low place. I used to say every day above ground is a good day, because we can be so hard on ourselves and say such harsh words that we can, it's so debilitating, to repeat myself. And so I encourage people to try to move forward, if it's even inch by inch. Just keep moving forward into your authenticity, and trusting your intuition will help you get there, because everybody has it. Everybody has the magic. Everybody has intuitive skills. Everybody. Some people don't choose to pay attention to it.
Yeah, and how encouraging that is, because I know a lot of times people look, just at their life journey, and you kind of have extremes here. We talk about the things that you went through and the things that you've learned, but everyone has something extreme that happens in their lives, and what a great story to read to help people go, you know what, there's hope at the end of the tunnel here. No matter how hard it gets, I can always move forward.
Right. You can't stay in victim consciousness, no matter what life treats you. So moving forward helps you. So I'm a survivor. I'm moving past this. I'm learning. I'm learning from this. And so we don't stay in the victim conscious. It's hard. I'm not always perfect. I don't always have the best days or do the right thing or feel great every day. But it's to move towards that more perfect place. And, and I feel that we have to be active in the world to make sure that other people have those opportunities as well.
How important that is. My goodness. In your book, you talk about, some one of the things you ask yourself is, what am I supposed to be doing or learning right now? And it's really interesting how important that question is.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Why do you say that? I'm curious why do you say that particularly?
Well, it really stuck out to me when I saw that. I was like, wow, what a power statement that is. Because I think a lot of times when people hear that kind of statement, it really helps to reframe what's going on at the moment. A lot of times we can kind of get stuck in the weeds of just, things that are happening, that, different things that are going on. If it's, just, I don't want to say trauma, but, hardship that's happening. But if we step back and look at, like, what am I supposed to be learning and what am I supposed to be doing? It really puts it in a whole nother perspective.
You're in process now. And the way to get into that process is to be ruthlessly honest with yourself. That's also very difficult. But in order to move forward, you have to be ruthlessly honest. And so that's part of the tools that we have to find our authenticity. And so, what is happening? What am I supposed to learn? And what am I honestly supposed to learn here? And so, in that honesty, it's not. You can't always be overly critical either. And so, there's a part of self-love that has to come in, and being kind to yourself to overcome the low self-esteem and the debilitating words that we can say to ourselves. Very harsh words. And to try not to believe that, and trusting our intuition can develop us out of those states of being.
How important is that? I think a lot of times people don't really understand that there's choices to be made even when things are the darkest. Yes, and
and the key there is choice. And so, in the sense that the tarot cards don't have any power over me, Mercury retrograde doesn't have any power over me. I have a choice here, and to recognize that I always have a choice. These are just guides and ways we can develop our insight, but they have no power. We have the power, and so asking these questions can help us gain our empowerment and, push us through inch by inch moving forward. Don't expect so much. Just inch by inch is important. and setting small goals so that every day you can at least, reach those small goals to develop your confidence in yourself and moving forward out of the victim consciousness.
My goodness, how important is that? Because while someone may not go through the extreme trauma that you went through, little traumas happen every day. And to have that kind of encouragement and positivity, empowerment, especially from someone that's gone through so much, what a statement that is.
Thank you. And we all, we can't do it alone. We have friends, we have therapists, we have podcasts like you're doing. So you don't just rely on yourself. If you need a therapist, go to a therapist. Talk to your friends, especially the ones that you trust and can confide in. So, take this. I think people feel weighed down, and so I'm hoping that this will give them some guidance. So move forward.
Oh, yeah, my goodness. I mean, and couldn't we use that every day of our lives, right? Just a little guidance to move forward. So when people want to connect with you, learn more about your book, or be part of your community, where can they go?
You can go to the memoir's website, myrandomdeath.com, just as it sounds, myrandomdeath.com. And you can click a button and buy the book, and I have a blog there, and you can see my events and the buzz. I posted that we were doing this interview, and I'll be posting in the buzz on the 6th that it's coming up, and so that's how they can engage with me. The memoir also has a Facebook page, My Random Death. I'm on Instagram as Myra Mossman, but I'm always posting my events there, and so there's many ways they can reach me. If they want to get something more personal, they can send me an email, and it's Myra Mossman at myrandomdeath.com. Myra, MyraMossman.
Oh my goodness, Myra. Well, it's been such an honor to spend this time with you, and not only to talk about your book, but your journey. What an inspiration you are to so many people.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate your interest, Marianne. Really appreciate it. Thank you.
Well, Myra, I'm so honored that we got to spend this time together, not only talking about your story and the impact it's had on you, but also your memoir, My Random Death. My Random Death is available at Amazon, and also make sure to visit Myra's website, myrandomdeath.com, for more information. Well, on that note, we're going to pause here for a quick break. You've been listening to Moments with Marianne. We'll be right back after these messages.
Internationally recognized and award-winning author Judy Goodman works and teaches outside the box of limited thinking. Working with people from every walk of life, her goal is to empower you to be the best you can be, no matter what the challenge is. Born with the gift of seeing beyond our normal vision, she has an extraordinary gift of working with every challenge. Teaching beyond conventional wisdom, her work is described as life-changing. Visit judygoodman.com. That's judygoodman.com.
There comes a moment when you realize you're somewhere special, when you discover that each beautiful creature that you see has been rescued from a life of absolute horror and brought to this incredibly free place. Here's where their lives were forever changed, and where yours will as well. Discover over 500 tigers, bears, and lions at the brand new visitor center at the Wild Animal Sanctuary just outside Denver. For more information, visit wildanimalsanctuary.org. Discover true freedom at the Wild Animal Sanctuary.
There are nearly 2 million Americans living with amputation. Many live right here in San Antonio. Becoming an amputee can be scary, frustrating, isolating, but there's no reason to feel alone. The San Antonio Amputee Foundation is here to help support you and guide you toward resources such as home and car modifications and even prosthetic limbs. For more information or to make a donation, visit saamputee.org. We'll help you live a full, active life, one step at a time. San Antonio Amputee Foundation, healing limbs, hearts, and souls.
If not me, then who? This ethos is driving the Travis Manion Foundation to empower veterans and families of fallen heroes to develop character in future generations. In 2007, Marine First Lieutenant Travis Manion was killed in Iraq while saving his wounded teammates. Travis's legacy lives on in the 5 words he spoke before leaving for his final deployment. If not me, then who? Guided by this mantra, veterans continue their service, developing strong relationships in the community, and thrive in their post-military lives. Visit TravisManion.org and ensure the character of our nation's heroes lives on in the next generation. If not me, then who?
Welcome back to Moments with Marianne. We're here today with our next special guest, Michelle DesPres, and she's here to share with us her new book, Intuitively You, Evolve Your Life and Mend the World. Now, Michelle is a certified clairvoyant medium trained under the Berkeley Psychic Institute program for inner development. She's an author with books designed to help others discover personal and collective fulfillment. She also published the Intuitive Ethical Standards, establishing guidelines for alternative therapists. So let's welcome to the show, Michelle DesPres.
Hi, welcome. Thank you for having me, Marianne.
Oh, what an honor it is to have you here to talk about your new book. I was so excited when I heard you had this out. It's like, oh, we've got to talk.
Yes, I'm very excited about it as well. It's been a wonderful undertaking. I'm so happy I did that. I'm so happy I took that on as a project.
Well, so why don't we start with, because I'm always very curious, like what inspired you to write this book?
Boy, I feel like there's just an education that's missing in our culture, and it's an intuitive education because there is a science to it and a philosophy attached to it. And I think it offers us the solution to our social, political, economical, educational issues. And so when I learned this as a skill, I couldn't help but want to spread that information. And writing just, has always been a draw for me. And so it was really one of the best ways I thought about reaching more people.
Well, I'm so glad you wrote the book, and we've got so many questions here for you. So why don't we start? Because I think a lot of times feeling intuitive can be kind of thrown around. So what does it mean to be intuitive?
Well, that's a good question because, being intuitive is just understanding how energy moves and how it interacts with us on a subtle level and how we can interpret that energy to receive information. And so for me, it's simply a navigational skill and tool that helps us to find our own personal balance and then be able to transfer that balance out into the world. So I don't think of it ever as a tool for predicting the future. And when I hear that, or people, say to me, oh, you're a fortune teller. Honestly, I kind of cringe because that's so not what intuition is. It's not about predicting a future. It's about looking at probability, possibility, opportunity. And so that's really what I believe intuition to be.
So with intuition, when we look at what intuition is, how does this lead humanity to our higher purpose?
Right. So, when we can look inward and we understand that we're really all one, that we're connected as one, that automatically levels the playing field. It automatically tells us that we're just each other. We're just all here having different experiences. But also, intuition, when we look from those higher perspectives and we glean, the bigger picture of things, it really helps us understand that each person has a right to their experience, no matter if we agree with it or not. That's not necessarily our growth in this lifetime. We recognize that each person is living a life that's just representative of the growth that they need in some way or another. And so it creates an equality, it creates a transparency, it puts everybody on the same page. But, also part of what intuition teaches us is that our souls are energy too, and that energy has taken on many forms, many lifetimes. And when we can look at ourselves and we can see our past lives and we understand we've been the victim, we've been the aggressor, we've been both. We can start to have acceptance for our pain so we can actually start to transcend it and stop recreating a past that was unconscious.
How important is that? My goodness. You look at this and it's like how it just unravels and everything matters, So when you look at intuition and how that is interwoven in our lives, I mean, how profound is that?
It's exactly right. And so, I feel like it's an education that, we could be teaching children as early as 6 and, to give them a new way of looking at themselves, looking at life. That's how you eradicate these issues we have going on in schools right now. I mean, not just school shootings, but suicide. And this, these kids that are falling off, the spectrum somewhere because they don't fit all the mold. We just don't teach our kids how to be intuitive and how to look at every person as a unique individual, but also as the same.
Yeah, without a doubt.
Takes care of everything.
Well, it does. And, it's interesting. You have this whole part in the book that talks about, intuitive understanding. And I think it's really important to go over what some of that is so people really understand how this works in their lives.
Right. Because, there are some guidelines to it in a sense. And that's why I do think it is a type of education. And so, I always sort of say one of the first things you have to recognize, like I said earlier, is it's all just energy. And science understands that now. We get the fact that it's all just energy. And our intuition is designed to interpret energy. And if we know how to work with it, we can move energy and manipulate energy simply with an intuitive skill. So that's one of those guidelines, is just understanding energy. One of the other things I think is really important is the understanding that intuition is meant to offer us solutions and opportunities. It's really meant to help us find answers. And so looking at it not as this sort of, prognosticating sort of tool, but what is it that needs healed? How can I grow from this? That's intuition's purpose. The other thing to recognize is that energy forms itself into symbols, and that's how we interpret it. I always say the language of the universe is symbolism. And it's your intuition. Again, you attune to that subtle energetic field, and it's going to show you a symbol or help you feel a symbol or know a symbol, something of that nature. But it's going to speak to you. That's how it communicates with you. That's how energy communicates with you and how your intuition picks it up. But also, there's no wrong way of doing this. Everybody is intuitive. There isn't anyone that's not intuitive. And however it works for you is correct. So, I always say, if you see the color pink and it, to you that might mean high energy and excitement. But when I see the color pink, it might mean, tiresome or worry. But both interpretations are correct, because it really only matters what the symbol is saying to you and what it's speaking to you in. And it's going to speak to you in your own frame of reference. So really, there's never a wrong way of doing it. And you just have to move yourself and sort of the thinking mind, in a sense. You've got to just allow things to be and to learn how to trust. And that's how you can really rely on intuition, is to know you can't do it wrong. If you just trust it for the most part, it's going to take you where it needs to take you. Of course, I'm going to say this too, because intuition doesn't always just take you to a great place. Sometimes it makes you go into the wrong relationships, or what seem like the wrong relationships, or that job that you thought you shouldn't go into, things like that. Your intuition can move you into those experiences too, because you need growth from them. So it's not necessarily about using intuition to get everything right. because there is no right. There's no wrong. There just is. And so recognizing that and how intuition is moving you into your experiences for growth, you can start to understand where your growth is and how to have it more gently, actually. But also the imagination. You know, I've been teaching now for 15 years. And one of the biggest and first things that students say to me is, I feel like it's just my imagination. I'm making this up. And over the years now, I've come to understand that imagination plays a role in intuition. It can send a signal, but it can also receive a signal. And so in that sense, imagination works with both the intellect and the intuition. And so not denying your imagination as a part of the process, but allowing it. Because in some sense, you know, let's say I'm asking you to see a flower, you know, just in your mind's eye, notice a flower. Why would your imagination bring you that flower versus anything else, right? Maybe you're seeing rose. Well, it could have been a daisy. It could have been a tulip. It could have been anything. Why that specifically? So, you know, always knowing that imagination plays a role. As a matter of fact, I was with a client yesterday, and I kept seeing her eating a sandwich. And I kept thinking to myself, oh, it's just about diet. It's about diet. And we're talking about it. It actually was all about the sandwich, because I should have seen her eating something different given the whole context that I was looking at it within. But as I started to really decode what was going on, the sandwich particularly had the bigger message, right, of why that specifically. So it's just about breaking down the details of what you're seeing and asking questions, like being the detective and asking your imagination, what are you showing me? And then the other guidelines that you want to be using is actually all four of your intuitive senses, which are, you know, the clairvoyance, your ability to see and energy in your mind's eye, right? Not in the tangible world, but in your mind's eye, see an image. That's your clairvoyance skill. Clairaudience, that ability to hear, right? And we can play with this even, you know, if you close your eyes and you just like that, like see the flower, that's your clairvoyance. You're using your clairvoyance right there. You can also, if you go back and you're remembering, you're having a memory from childhood and you can kind of envision that in your mind, you're being clairvoyant. So everybody's already being clairvoyant when they do those things. They're already being intuitive. They just don't recognize that. Same with clairaudience. You can hear energy. Like I can still hear my second grade teacher talking to me, like praising me for, you know, doing something good in class. I can still hear her words. That's my clairaudience. And so if you can hear people in your mind's eye like that too. You can also pick up frequencies with that clairaudience skill that tell you the nature of energy. You can also sense energy by feeling. And I think this is one of the most difficult senses, is the clairsentient feeling, which is picking up the emotions of others. And anybody who is highly emotional and sensitive is usually bombarded by other people's emotions because they haven't been taught how to recognize what is theirs versus somebody else's. And it actually can become very debilitating, especially when you try to do for others the things you shouldn't be doing. And, you know, you can deplete yourself in that way. But also just the idea of the mood swings it can cause a person to go through and the sensitivities it can cause. We have a lot of empaths out in the world who just feel everything and are overwhelmed by those feelings. And you can imagine why. I mean, look at the state of the world today. They're not getting bombarded with happy feelings. And it's really critical that they learn some skills around how to, in some sense, use their other skills, be more clairvoyant, more clairaudient, or claircognizant, because claircognizant is the fourth. And that's that ability just to know. And you know that feeling too. There's times when you just know who's calling, you know what you're going to find when you get into work, things like that. That's a skill that we all have as well. And so we've got to be really looking at life and wandering around using those skills at all times, because also those four foundations allow us to actually create balance in the world. Not only do they give us personal balance, but that's the key to creating outward balance. When we're clairvoyant, we can see another person's perspective. When we're clairaudient, we can listen, we can hear another person. When we're clairsentient, we can feel, we can empathize. And when we're claircognizant, we can discover innovative solutions to any big problem, including our climate change. So those are some of the guidelines. Well, those are the guidelines.
Well, I'm glad that you took the time to break those down. A lot of times people, they just don't really kind of understand, they get these feelings and these emotions and they're tapping into other people or not sure, like they're able to discern whose emotions or feelings they're feeling. And so there's a lot of confusion that comes with being intuitive. And so I really like how you broke that down so people can understand, hey, maybe I need to look at this. Maybe it's how I'm feeling, or maybe it's how someone I bumped into, how they're feeling. It's not even my stuff.
Right. Because that's one of the keys to maintaining your personal balance, is to learn how to be your authentic self. So if you can look and see just what you're getting bombarded with, and then you can decide what is right for you and not, put you in your empowerment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, without a doubt. Well, and so as we become more intuitively aware, are there some things that people really need to be aware of? Is there anything that, is when we're able to feel other people's emotions, maybe we need to learn how to block those so, we're not tapping in inappropriately, or, we're able to discern better, like what's my responsibility and kind of where is that line?
Yeah, that's such a good point. That's exactly correct. So I think that's one of the first things you got to start doing, is looking at it and going, okay, is this mine? And if it's not, do I do anything about it? And one of the first things I teach intuitives is how not to heal others. Because most of us are very empathetic. We do just want to help each other. We do really just love at our core. And so it's a natural instinct to go, oh, let me help you. I'll take care of that. Oh my gosh, if somebody's crying or down or things like that, it's so easy to run in and try and rescue because you just don't want to see them in that state. However, that's where you use your awareness and you go, what are they learning here? Because if I run in and rescue them, I'm going to stop them from learning their lesson and they're not going to grow. And so if you can get good at going, okay, what is the lesson here for them, for me? Maybe I'm learning that I give too much and I need to learn how not to give so much. And I need to recognize that it's okay for people to struggle because that's how they're going to grow and learn. And so, always being aware to that level, what is it that the situation is about? And and always paying attention to the symbolism that's going on around you. I think that's also one of the things that is really helpful, because we all are always working on some element of ourselves. We're always healing something within ourselves, right? Improving some element. And so if you are aware at any given moment, you can pay attention to the coincidences, the synchronicities, those kinds of things that are happening to understand what you're going through and learning. Like I was having to change offices a while back, and I was resistant to it. I loved my office and it was being sold and I didn't want to have to move and I really didn't want to have to go look for another office. I was just being resistant. But over a period of like a week, I kept seeing fox everywhere. I mean, in just at random times in amazing places, on trucks passing by. It was just the fox, the fox, the fox. And so I recognized, okay, well, I'm getting some kind of message here. That's too much symbolism. I'm going to have to decode what this means. So, of course, one of the best ways to do that is I Google, symbolism of the fox. And you can read through, the Native Americans always called it fox medicine. And you can read through their medicine because it's what you need to take in. It's what you're mastering. It's what you're needing to grow and heal from. So as I'm reading about the fox, one of its descriptions is to be adaptable. And when I heard that and when I read that, I felt it. I knew immediately that the fox's message to me was be adaptable. And I thought to myself, okay, where am I supposed to be adaptable? And immediately I got it. My office space. You're going to have to adapt. And so I let go of my resistance. And it wasn't even, it was just a matter of days even. And it completely flipped. And I ended up in a better office environment than I even ever expected. And I think if I'd kept in resistance, that just wouldn't have happened. I would have blocked that opportunity. But because I was aware enough of what's the universe saying to me right now? I'm just at the grocery store. I'm going about my daily business, whatever. But I keep getting these little signs. Being aware is the key. And then breaking it down, understanding that that's your intuition going, oh, pay attention to this. Pay attention to this. There's something here for you.
That's really important when you get these messages, because I think a lot of times people see these things and they're like, well, I keep seeing this crazy fox, but what's going on, without really kind of diving into the greater message that's there. And it's interesting because, spirit will give us these hints, but we have to pay attention.
Right. Well, and that's kind of often how it first reaches out to you too. If you're seeing pennies everywhere or getting dimes or quarters, or you're finding feathers, but you can't understand why, it's like, well, what are they trying to say to me? What are they trying to say to me? Really, what they're trying to say to you is, you're intuitive. You have this intuitive skill. You should use it more. And so usually in the beginning of those kinds of things, when it's like, I don't know why this stuff is happening, it's because the universe just wants you to recognize that those kinds of things can happen and that you want to start developing that and practicing it more. Then it'll start really fine-tuning its messages for you.
Yeah, and be able to kind of discern a little bit more. So how does intuition and karma play a part with each other?
Yeah, so intuition allows us to witness the Akashic records, which is just an energetic accounting of your soul's history. And so it's through that use of your intuition that you can go in and read basically what your soul has endured. Many of us, the women, our men too have had feminine lifetimes. We've all had masculine and feminine lifetimes. But a lot of us women who are here today, who are really on a mission to promote, the feminine essence, we as souls have had many lifetimes of enduring the oppression of the feminine. And we come around today and we have a lot of bad feelings about it. We have bad feelings toward our men. We have bad feelings toward our women too. We've gone into competition with our women through this period of time also. And so, the element that intuition allows us to do is go back and reassess. Now, why am I having this issue with my girlfriends, or why am I in this relationship? We can look back through our karma. We can search back and we can recognize, because I have a built-in belief now, my soul got programmed into believing as a woman I'm less than. And now I'm just angry about it. But because I can see that now, I can change that pattern. And so intuition allows us to see our karma, the things we're bringing forward from lifetime after lifetime, so we can heal it and move it out and create something different. But you have to be able to become conscious of it. And that's what your intuition does. It allows you to become conscious of your karma so you can recognize your patterns and then change those today, because today is the time to change patterns.
Well, no time like the present to make those changes. And your book, Intuitively You, really helps people to get to a place where they're kind of understanding not just what intuition is, but like what their responsibility. And you hit a part also that talks about ethics. And I really liked this chapter because a lot of times I've seen people who talk about intuition, but they don't get into the ethical part of it. So, why don't you share a couple with us? And we're not going to go over all 7, but why don't you share a couple of the ethical points with us that, I think people should be kind of aware of?
Yes. So I mentioned the first one, not healing other people. That's an ethic. Another one is just having permission, getting permission to look at other people's energy. But I think these are really the more important ones, like assuming integrity, recognizing that once you're intuitive, and you understand what your role is in things and what another person's role in it, breeds integrity within yourself. You have to be a bigger person all of a sudden. And I think that's part of what elevates us into our next levels, is by recognizing the integrities. I also think that objectivity, being able to really be objective and recognizing each person's unique experience is right, and working with that and holding that as a standard for ourselves. And then, like we've been talking about, using intuition therapeutically, to figure out your own stuff, figure out what's going on. But then most importantly is when not to be intuitive, because, you might be able to see energy and you can read other people's energy for sure, but that doesn't mean that you should, or that you have that permission to do such a thing. And so recognizing that, you're not here to be a sideshow. This is a serious undertaking when you're talking about intuition. It's not, look at me, I can predict what's going on with you. It's, oh, you know what? Each person has a right to their privacy, their own information, their own way of coming about it. If they want my insight, they'll ask for it. If they don't, then I'm not going to look at that, but I'll keep looking at my own self. And so, using that ethic of not being not turning what is a psychic, into some sideshow, but really taking that skill and recognizing it as a higher skill, something that brings about a transparency and integrity and makes us have to be bigger people, and really coming at it from that perspective.
Yeah, it makes such a big difference. You also talk about in your book and this is a part that I was really impressed with, it talks about mental health. So how does that even correlate? Why don't you share with our listeners how that even correlates with our intuition?
Yeah, boy, because the mind and the intellect, or the intellect and intuition, are so closely linked. And the problem is that the mind cannot conceive anything new for itself. It's actually finite, and it can only hold what is given to it, but it can't perceive something new for itself. And it's the spirit's job to bring the mind something new. And so if we're not only fixated in mind, and we're not looking to spirit and where the intuition rests, where possibility, probability, and opportunity exists, then we can't feed that into the mind. And then when we're not feeding that into the mind gets dulled, the mind runs away with itself, the mind starts to think it's the master, and we get mental illness. But the other thing is, when we are not teaching people how to use intuition and understand the difference between their intuition and their intellect, when you've got young kids who see spirits and they don't have an outlet for what that is and what to do about it, they can turn to darker spirits who have a little more sway over them, or they go into drugs and alcohol to try and mask what they're seeing, and it creates a whole host of mental illness in them. And so when we're not teaching them to go, oh, that's an energy that I can say no to, we are allowing that mental illness to take hold, because we're not giving them a context for what's happening to them.
Well, that's so important, especially with young people and they don't understand what's going on. Being able to give them that space to experience what they're experiencing, but also help guide them. What a big deal that is.
Oh, I've seen it. I've had clients, I've had young people who have said, I've seen entities around them, and I call it out. This is what I see. And they say to me, oh my God, everybody tells me I'm crazy.
Mm-hmm. That's a common thing that people hear, and it's interesting when I first started seeing, because I saw energy as a kid and then turned it off. And when it started to come back, I was like, oh, I might need a padded room. This is kind of crazy.
Right.
Because times had changed. There was a little bit more openness to this kind of discussion. And so it really helps people to kind of go, okay, well, you're seeing that. I have too. It's interesting. The more open we're about that. I've had people from all walks of life come up to me and go, I've seen things too, and really never was able to express it to anybody.
Exactly. And how it's so freeing for them to get to say that, right? And have somebody to talk to.
Oh yeah, without a doubt, and that's why I felt like your book, Intuitively You, is such a great resource, because it gives people not only language, but it helps them with ethics. It helps them understand themselves, responsibility, so they can take that and kind of move forward.
Right. That's my hope. So I'm glad it's coming off.
Well, hey, Michelle, where can people connect with you and be part of your community?
Yes, you can reach me at theethicalintuitive.com. and get involved in any of the things I have going on. I'm putting together an online course for the book.
Oh, awesome.
Awesome. Yeah. So, always spreading the word and really trying to get that education out there.
Mm-hmm. Well, and people learn different ways. So start with the book, check out the online course. Michelle, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show with us here today.
Well, thank you, Marianne. It was really a pleasure. It was my joy.
Well, thank you, Michelle. It's been such an honor to spend this time with you. And of course, to talk about your new book, Intuitively You. Intuitively You is available at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and all indie retailers. Well, we're at the end of our time today. I would like to thank everyone for tuning in. You're listening to Moments with Marianne. And remember, make every moment count.
In a single moment, your life can change. Moments with Marianne is a transformative hour that covers an endless array of topics with the best of the best. Her guests are leaders in their fields, ranging from inspirational authors, top industry leaders, and business and spiritual entrepreneurs. Each guest is gifted and a true visionary. A recognized leader in her own work, and while teaching others to develop, refocus, and grow, Marianne will bring the best guest and sometimes a special surprise. Don't miss this. You never know just which moment will change your life forever. Moments with Marianne airs every Sunday, Monday, Thursday, and Friday at 8 p.m. Eastern and 5 p.m. Pacific Time. Make sure to tune in and visit momentswithmarianne.com for more information.